Okay, so I'm really excited now to introduce you to Mel. I see you there, Mel. I've got you right up on my screen, so I'm sort of scanning to see where everybody is. Yeah, this is really exciting because Mel became an elephant rider. I think it was in March. That's what my records say. Mel, does that sound right? In 2000 and this year, March this year.
Yeah, that sounds around about right.
Okay, nice. And then almost immediately she started leveling up to get to bronze and then silver elephant rider level. And I was just sitting back in awe, seeing whenever you post a bronze or elephant rider workshop, I read it. For those of you who have asked questions, I get those questions a bit. Do you even read those things? I read every single one because there's something really amazing to learn in each of them. And I suddenly was seeing all these workshops being run by Mel. She made her way to silver really quickly in July this year. And all of those sessions, the way she was using the game was really, really, really inspiring. And it also gave me the confidence to know that this game can work in the health sector. And because I'd been asked by a lot of people previously, will this game be appropriate for our doctors or for our hospital or for our DHB? And my response was always, well, I believe it is because those places are made up of humans, just like any other team I've used with this game. But I hadn't really heard or seen any stories of it happening until Mel started just firing through all of her work on her way to silver. And so I invited Mel to come share her story about what she's learned on her journey using the game in that space. And I'm sure the lessons will be applicable across all people and all teams. So Mel, welcome to the Elephant Rider Gathering and looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for inviting me along as well. I'll just share my screen, so hopefully you can all see that. Awesome. So as Jeremy mentioned, my name's Mel Warhurst and I've been at the Southern DHB for about 9 months now. And I think maybe it was just over 6 months ago that I became an elephant rider. So we've been using the emotional culture deck for about 6 months now at the District Health Board. And when Jeremy asked me if I wanted to come and talk and share, I looked at the little poster that's up on my wall beside me, which says, my success relies on me feeling at work. And 3 of the words were inspired, open-minded, and involved. And I thought coming along and talking does exactly those 3 things. So I thought I couldn't really turn that down either. So at the Southern District Health Board, we have just over 5,000 staff and we've got about we're across 8 different hospitals and it's hugely largely dispersed area. So we've got dispersed teams, dispersed patients and a huge area of travel between the different hospitals as well. So we cover communities made up of 300,000, but the area that we cover is twice the size of Belgium. So as you can imagine, it's probably quite hard sometimes to get cohesiveness across our hospitals. So some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment in the health sector, I'm sure you're aware of some of these, but I'll just touch on them. So our staff always have highly demanding work. They never know who the next patient's going to be, what their challenges are going to be, or what other challenges they might bring with them. Particularly if you look at ED, you never know whether the person's coming in intoxicated or with challenging family members as well. So they're always under that additional pressure. We're also, like many industries, seeing a real staff shortage. So with the borders being closed, it is a lot harder to get staff in, as many of you have probably experienced. And also the staff that we do currently have working are feeling those implications. So they're fatigued and are in some cases working quite long hours as well. Shift work has its own challenges, so particularly on wellbeing of staff, but also in terms of trying to get all of one team in the same room at the same time. And also as a staff member, when you come on a new shift, you're working with different teams all the time as well. So there's different people around you each day. So it can be quite challenging to get those practices embedded across that team. This is one that we don't want to change, but our staff do have a huge patient focus. And obviously that's a really good thing for our health system in New Zealand, but our staff would much rather look after the next patient that's sitting there waiting than take their breaks and take time to themselves to reflect and sort of just take 5 and understand where they're at and how they're feeling as well. We've got constant change happening all the time, so health is obviously constantly growing and changing. We've got in Dunedin the new health board happening, the new hospital rebuild happening. So at the moment we are starting to see a few little changes happening there, but in the next 5 years, as we ramp up and get closer to that becoming a digital hospital, there'll be a lot that changes there for staff as well. So there's that sort of angst at the moment around that. And then obviously we've got COVID-19 happening. It's been happening now for over 18 months in New Zealand. So the pressure that that brings, and the anxiety, the stress, the always changing rules as well. So as we all know at the moment, we've got the new traffic light system. What that looks like isn't, in my opinion, as clear as what it possibly will be in the future. So just, yeah, trying to work out what's happening all the time around that as well. And then we just don't know when it's going to hit. And I'm sure some of you have probably seen this morning that Christchurch has just had 2 positive cases confirmed. So we're kind of just waiting for it really at the moment and trying to get it ready so that if people are in the community, how we can support them. And then when they need to come into hospital, how we can support them as well. And then lastly, we've got the DHB mergers happening in June to July next year. So that's all the health district health boards in New Zealand merging to become one. We've got a little bit of information around what that looks like at the moment, but just as much as you all do, that of everyone that's based in New Zealand. So there's still a lot more to come out around that, and that has its own challenges and angst that comes with that too. So looking at all of those things that are huge things that impact our workforce, we started using the emotional culture deck basically to understand your sphere of control and what you can control. So majority of these things are out of our control. So we use the emotional culture deck to help identify what are the things that you can change at work to help your team's culture to change and to get that desired culture that you want to feel at work as well. So how we've been using it is in small teams or within the teams that the staff have most of their day-to-day with. So we're using it more sort of on that frontline level, I guess, than the higher organisation level at the moment. So we're working with teams to help them understand and identify what they can change that's meaning to them and how they can impact their immediate team environment at work as well. And it's showing individuals that they can actually influence, and it gives them that responsibility to create that desired culture without focusing on all of those large things that are happening around them that are out of their control. And so far we've found it to be incredibly successful, despite the fact that we're not doing it on that organisational level. So some of the ways that we've used it, I've used Tuckman's stages of team development there, the group development that shows teams at different stages. So we've used it at the forming stage. So when teams are just coming together to create usually a project, we're using it with them to create that desired culture from the start. So an example of this one was we had a team of vaccinators all come together. So they all had different backgrounds. Some were from the health areas, some were coming in to do more administration tasks or more supportive tasks. So everyone was completely different. And we got 50 staff members of them to come together and create what that desired culture looked like for them. We didn't have a huge amount of time, so what we did was we just focused on that desired culture side and identified what team rituals and actions they were going to commit to create that desired culture for them. That vaccination team is slowly now coming to the end of their project time together, and the feedback from that team has been that it's been one of the best teams that they've ever worked for, particularly in the health sector, and they're really the bond that they had with each other and the positive impact and support that they had around each other, it was really strong. And I think that is from them setting that intention from the start around this is what their desired culture looked like, and this was the things that they were committing to. And they had the poster up on the wall. You can see on the bottom right-hand side photo, there's an example. That's not their one, but that was an example of one of the teams that they would have had up on the wall that they can keep going back to and make sure that they are, feeling those things at work and not feeling the things they don't want to feel. We've also used it with storming teams. So some people might call these teams dysfunctional. Personally, we don't like that word because the teams are still functioning. They're just not functioning at their best. So we'll go in there and see how they can identify what they can change and what they have the power to change within themselves to try and move forward. An example of this one was we had a team recently who they had a significant number of new staff members, and that had come quite quickly after a few passing of other team members, but also just new leadership as well for that team. So we ran initially a workshop with the original team members and just to understand how they were feeling. And for that one, it was really important for leadership to be in the room to identify the challenges and just basically do a check-in around how they were feeling. And going forward, over the next few weeks, we're now pulling that whole team together to identify moving forward, how do they want to work as a team with the new staff members being there as well. We also work with norming and performing teams, usually in those spaces where doing the complete canvas to identify, looking forward, what is it that will get you to that next level and help you to keep living that sort of more desirable culture, and how can they continue that in the future. In the top left-hand photo, you can see there's a check-in with a couple of the teams that we've done. So this one was created in the initial workshop, and we've left it with that team now to continue checking and trying to move those dots more to the desirable side. Other ways that we've used it, in these ways we don't so much go through the entire canvas, but we'll pick up the game and try and embed it with the different practices that we already have embedded across the hospital. So one of the ways is retrospectives. So you can see in the top left-hand photo there, we've used the emotional culture deck and sort of combined it with the sailboat retrospective. So around, in that particular photo, it's around what their dream state looks like. So with that, yeah, it's just a check-in with the teams around how they're feeling. The example that I gave before is a good one for when leadership and management are in the room, just to identify sort of where's the team at the moment, at that point in time, and looking forward, what can they do to keep creating that desirable culture. We also use it for change management. So this was an interesting one that I hadn't seen that we could use the emotional culture deck in. So I had created a change cycle workshop for a large team around helping them to identify where they were at in a change cycle and helping them to move through those stages to come out of that change. And a week before we were due to run that workshop, Jeremy's last newsletter came out, which was around using the emotional culture deck for change. And I also, that sort of triggered something in my brain to think back to a talk that Lottie had done earlier around using the emotional culture deck for change. So we tried to work it in how we could. So what we did was we got everyone in the room to identify a change that they were experiencing at the moment or expecting to experience in the future, and identify 3 cards. We, like Jeremy did earlier, didn't tell them whether, we didn't sort of give a guidance on black or white cards, just said pick 3 cards around how you're feeling about your change. And then what we did was we then went through what a change cycle process looks like. And then once everyone had an understanding of what each stage looked like, went back to the 3 cards and said, so now using those cards around how you're feeling, identify where in the change cycle that you're at. So that helped to identify if it was more desirable cards at that point in time. You probably knew you were in near the end of the change and you're sort of coming through that change period. If you were using the more undesirable feelings, you were probably earlier in that cycle and still in that angst sort of phase of that change. And then from there, we identified what proactive and reactive things you could do at that point of change, and then how you could move forward into the next area, I guess, of that change so that you can get through the change. And we also helped identify with managers as well, if their people are feeling this way, where are they at in the change and how can you help them to move forward through that change? So really, really effective use of the emotional culture deck, and we found that it really helped people to identify where they were at. Other ways we've used it is with icebreakers. So we run a lot of different workshops across the DHB, and we'll just use it at the start as a wee check-in, how are you feeling? And as facilitators, it helps us to identify where the team's at. As managers, it helps them to identify how their teams are feeling, and then for people as well, because they often don't have that time to stop and check in. Now, the last 2 are ones that I haven't used at the DHB, but I've used in my personal life. So one-on-one career coaching. Have sat down with people who are looking for new jobs or are considering a career change and got them to identify for them what does their success rely on them feeling at work and what do they not want to feel when they're at work, and then starting to look at what organisations would help them to achieve that desired culture and what may go against what they don't want to feel, so helping them to identify which companies they should be looking to apply for. And then on the one-on-one mentoring, I've got a couple of Otago University mentees, and so at the start of the mentorship, I'll sit down with them and go through for them what will make the mentorship successful and what do they want to feel within our mentoring system, within our mentoring sessions, and then what don't they want to feel. And so they, in the top right-hand photo, that's one of the mentees' things at the start. So we've been recently checking in around making sure she is feeling those things and not feeling the other ones. So again, tons of different ways that we've used it. lots of different results and lots of different teams that we've used it for as well. But we do try to embed it in what we are doing, just so that it's worked through the current practices. Okay, so the challenges that we've faced, the first one's that feelings raise emotion. And it sounds really obvious, and you think, that you would understand that going in, but for this one, there's definitely been a lot of workshops where we've had tears, we've had a lot of upset emotions come through. And so as a facilitator, it's trying to acknowledge that and wrap the empathy and support around them, but being able to move the workshop through as well. And what we have found is that teams are really supportive of each other, and they do want to be there for each other. So they do wrap around that person, and it also opens up the vulnerability to the game. So it's having those strategies as a facilitator to try and acknowledge that, but then also keep that workshop moving forward in a more positive way as well. And another good thing about this is that, as I've sort of mentioned through the challenges, our staff don't stop at all. So giving them this forum of the emotional culture that can actually stop and to recognise where you're at gives them that break and that pause, the forum basically to identify how they're feeling and just check in with themselves, and for the managers to understand that as well. The other one, so shift work and dispersed teams raises challenges in terms of getting everyone in the same room at once, so getting a whole team together. And I know that's not always the objective of this game, but if you can get everyone in the same room, I do think it makes it more powerful. So what we've been doing to try and overcome this is running it with different parts of the team. So still having a significant number of the team in the room and just running it in a couple of different parts. And for the dispersed teams, similar, we could run it in the different locations. But what we're finding now that we've been using the game for a while is that managers have actually come on board and they're seeing the benefits of it. So they have been more more accommodating, I guess, at bringing everyone together. So, for example, if there's half the team in Invercargill and half the team in Dunedin, we'll meet in the middle and go to Balclutha where that's possible. And obviously, there does still have to be people on the wards and in the booking areas, so that's not always possible to get everyone there, but we're just working around that as we come to those challenges. The first team that I ran a workshop with, that was a dispersed team, they both came up with the exact same 5 desirable culture feelings, which was really awesome to see. I mean, that doesn't always happen, but that was a really cool thing to happen for the very first one. Challenges that we also face are around the fatigue. So I've sort of touched on this already, just around how fatigued the staff can be. And they find it, well, what we've noticed is that when it's a team that's been really under the pressure, they'll find their desirable culture and they can identify what the undesirable looks like. But when we move forward into those, what are the rituals and actions that you can do to start to create that desirable culture and not to create that undesirable culture, that's where the stuckness happens. So quite the narrow-mindedness around, there's not a lot that we can control. But what we have noticed is that it's just the smallest changes that make a difference. So for example, one team, they just wanted acknowledgement. And for them, it was like, well, when you go on your break and someone else takes on your patient load just for that 10, 15 minutes, when you come back, do you say thank you to each other? And it sounds like the smallest thing, but when you're worried about that next patient and just moving, on to help someone else, just saying thank you to your colleague wasn't happening. And just those small things are making such a difference. So we, as facilitators, when we come out, have to try and remember that whilst it wasn't a huge thing that the team came up with, it is those small things that are making a difference. And so it's encouraging the teams to just get that little win for a start, and then they can continue to grow on that as that desired culture happens more and more. And the last one, this was a huge mistake, but a funny mistake that we won't do again. So right before we were about to run a workshop with 50 people, Tess, my colleague, and I mixed up 3 packs of cards at once, completely on accident. So we were left playing Snap in a very rapid Snap way on the ground, trying to get all the cards back into their correct packs before we started that workshop. So I'm sure other people have probably had that experience, but we've now dotted our cards on the back, and I know they've got the numbers, but the dots, just so that we can very quickly sort them if we ever have to again. But hopefully we won't experience that one again. Cool. So what's next for us? We're looking towards moving the game with adjourning teams, so teams that are starting to wrap up. And whilst initially I don't think of the game like this, I think you can identify, what worked for you as a team and how did you feel, sort of more as that retrospective, and then what can you take moving into other teams around, how you wanted to feel at work and what rituals and actions helped to create that. change, we've just run that one change workshop at the moment. So we'll look forward into the future with the different changes that we've got happening around COVID, around the DHB mergers, and around the new hospital rebuild, to keep embedding that within our change workshops as well. Virtual delivery isn't something that we've dabbled with either, only primarily because a lot of our staff don't have access to technology in front of them immediately day to day. But by offering it virtually, we can access those teams that do. So we've got administration teams, leadership teams, booking teams. So just to help create that sort of area of access and improve those access points. And lastly, embedding it in team check-ins. So when we walk out of a workshop, we want to make sure that those teams are, embedding it in their day-to-day check-ins and their weekly check-ins, just to sort of keep moving forward with the benefits that the emotional culture deck can provide there with them. So in summary, as you can probably tell, and as I'm sure you were aware already, but DHBs are huge places and we're a huge organisation with many complexities. But what we are seeing and using the emotional culture deck is that it's got real felt effects on these teams, and it is changing the way they're feeling about coming to work and how they feel when they are at work, and understanding that you as one individual and as a small team within such a big organisation can actually make a difference to how your culture is and how your team's feeling. So when I look back and think about how we've used the emotional culture deck over the last 3 months, I sort of thought I'll check in and see how I'm feeling about that, and the feelings that I felt are courageous. So courageous to take this game forward and talk about feelings and emotions, which, as we know before this game, we often didn't talk about. I'm proud of how far we've come with the game, inspired for what's next for us in the future and to continue using it, and also inspired by the people that we have in the DHB. And every workshop that we run is so different, and hearing the challenges that our teams are facing, just inspired that they come to work every day and continue to do their best and focus on their patients as well, and optimistic about what is next for us. So, does anyone have any questions?
Oh, amazing. If you've got questions for Mel, just type them in the chat box now, and then we'll cover them off. And just as you're typing, I want to say thanks, Mel. That was unbelievable. I'm continuing to be blown away by the amazing diverse uses that you have for the game. I knew about a few of them, but I didn't realize the extent of that as well, by the way. So all of you are hearing that for the first time. I'm hearing some of that for the first time as well. That's just absolutely phenomenal. And I love that you connected it to forming, norming, and storming and performing. Like that can apply across any industry, across any team. And that's just a beautiful thought. And the final thing that I really adored there was that you talked about using it to explore your sphere of control. I think it's a really lovely thought, because often you can get stuck in an environment where you're more focused on the things you can't control. And I love you brought it back to that. That's so beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
So questions here. How do you manage getting cards to everybody?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do it differently each time. So depending on the number of people in the workshops, sometimes we will, if we've got enough cards, we'll give everyone a package, and we know that that works the best. But what we do is for the workshops where we've got 50 plus, we'll get them into small teams and then have them either scatter the cards across the desk or across the ground, depending on what the environment is. And then basically just get them to write it on a post-it note. So don't pick up the cards that you want, because we know that that will either influence someone else around you or take that card away, so someone else thinks they can't use it. So we'll get them to write it on a post-it note, and then just keep that for themselves as well. Other ways that we've used it is just with the posters. So as Jeremy had up before, the words just in the one area, we've got posters that we can take if we need to, that are laminated sheets just with all the words on them. And we find, whilst it works, it's not quite the same feeling as flicking through the cards, and people don't take their time as much to think through every word. They sort of go to the immediate word that they see, so change it depending on how we go. Sometimes we'll put it up on a projector as well, and again, it's not the same as sorting the cards, but it does still work.
Yeah, nice. Suzanne's got a great question here, which is, have you done any multidisciplinary meetings, so like cross disciplines, doctors, nurses, radiographers, all in one workshop?
We have one scheduled that the last lockdown unfortunately took away from us, but we have got that one scheduled at the moment, and that will be a whole ward one, so that will be really interesting. We've done it with multidisciplinary before, but more within smaller teams. So we haven't yet reached that whole ward level, but I'll let you know when it happens in the next few weeks, hopefully.
Erica is there a particular change cycle you were using? I think you might have mentioned it.
Yeah, it is, gosh, I'm trying to think of the name of it off the top of my head. It's called The Change Cycle, and it's run by a guy in South Africa called Rick. I'll share the link after as well. I'll just pop it in the text in the box.
Yeah, and send it to me, Mel, and then I'll send it out when we send the recording out to everybody as well.
Yeah, awesome. I think it would work with any cycles of change, but that's just the one that we use at the DHB.
Wonderful. Erica, another question. Was it difficult to get initial buy-in to run the sessions?
Yeah, I had seen the game work before I started becoming an elephant rider myself. And so when you explain the game, I think it is really challenging to see the actual benefit that it can have until you see it run in practice. So initially, yes, but now that some teams have had, well, all the teams we've run it with have had success with it. The other managers that hear about it are more, they've got that buy-in a lot quicker. And there's the occasional team that will stop, and when we say all of our workshop offerings, they'll actually pick that one and say, we want our team to create their desirable culture. So we are seeing more and more buy-in as we run it more and more.
Nice. And then final question from, where is this? I've just lost it here. It's from Desley, which is, have you seen an improvement in psychological safety?
Yes, I would say we have with a lot of the teams that we've run it with. Yeah. We also run psychological safety, our psychological first aid training. But I think we've definitely seen more trust within those teams as they understand that each other are feeling the same as each other. And often that's all it is understanding that someone else is feeling this way. We had one where the team sort of were blaming leadership, I guess, on some of the challenges that they were facing. And we had the leaders come in for the workshop that we ran with them. And the leader, which was sort of the highest leader in the room, picked powerless, I think was her white card. And she explained the reasons around that, and that, a lot of it is often out of her control as well. And there's all those environmental factors that control it. And then once the team heard that, you could almost just see everyone in the room feel that empathy towards that leader as well. And that really increased the trust within that team that actually, people are doing the best they can to try and help them. And I think it helps you as well, all within the team, to identify that they can change things too. And that it's not always the leader that has to. So yeah, I would say yes, we have.
So a question for the whole group here. And if you do have an answer to this, or of some stuff, please share it in the Slack channel, the learning channel. Does anybody have any mechanisms or tools or measures to measure psychological safety? Are they using them at the moment? I'll be really intrigued to know what people might be using or what they've heard of, because I think it's a great question, because imagine if you could do some sort of baseline at the beginning of any engagement or the beginning of using the game, and then you then periodically tested that. That would be a fascinating way to then have some sort of quantitative feedback for whoever the powers might be within the organization. So if anybody's using anything to do that, I'll be really interested to learn more and see how it could fit into what we're doing. Yeah. Amazing, Mel. Thank you so much for that presentation and those bright spot stories. As I said, I'm floored by the diversity of uses that you've put the game into.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to talk as well. And thank you for everyone for listening. If you've got any questions, feel free to just get in touch, jump on LinkedIn or whatever. And I'm happy to share more if you want to chat through one-on-one the things that we have done.
Nice, yeah. Even if you've got questions, could I be so bold to say, if you've got a question for Megan, Mel, could you put it in the Slack channel so we could all learn from your questions in the learning channel? And then that means that we're all going to hear, if you're typing answers, Mel, at least we can all see the responses and the questions. I think that would be a great way to continue the cycle of learning together. Yeah,
sure. Yep.
Amazing. So